Hello, heathens, and welcome back to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your Absol pugilist host, Megan Angus. Or welcome if this is your very first time here. No, it's gonna be fine. It's just a little witchcraft, that's all. We can have some for a treat. Okay, there's stuff going on. Let's get into it. Here we are. 2024 Mabon season super full hunter's moon in Aries. First and foremost, as always, massive mega thank yous to all of my patrons and followers. Thank you so much for supporting this work. You fools. Okay. What do I need to say before we get into the broadcast at large? I only have a few spots left in October for readings. If you're thinking about getting one, sign up now because they're out. Books are open for patrons for November. What else is coming up? I know I've been talking about tarot classes. I swear to the gods, they're coming. Believe in me. But I do actually have other stuff planned before that. So, just get used to it. This is what it is. But the Wheel of the Year classes are coming back. Our next class will be Samhain, October 29th. I think. I might do it the 30th. It's coming up pretty quick here. I will make a formal announcement on Patreon, my website, the socials, etc., shortly. Mark thine calendar, O most gentlest of listeners. We also are going to be, once again, conducting our annual Eve of the Dead procession this year. So if you are in the Seattle area and you want to join us, you can head to the Samhain section on my website to get more information. There's a flyer for the event and a map of our most likely route for the procession, as well as to get a general sense of like what's going on. You can download that stuff, download the information, sorry. But get a general sense of like what we're doing and why we're doing it and all of that good stuff. Please join us. We'd love to have you. I also have Samhain holiday cards available on my site with some awesome original artwork from Jessica Henry, and 10% of your coins will go to the International Fund for Animal Welfare. I know there's lots of other things happening in the world, but this group are showing up anywhere there are war situations, poacher situations, natural disaster situations to help both wild and domesticated animals. They are a really cool group and doing a lot of amazing work globally, and your card purchase supports them. Okay. Is that everything? I think that's everything. I think that is everything. So let's get into it, shall we? As usual, let's ground into this week's energy. This is, as I just said, 2024 Mabon season super full hunter's moon in Aries. As always, what are we doing in Mabon season? We are working on the harvest. We are working through various ideas and forms and elements of purification, and we are doing whatever work we need to do to shift our various bodies and our environments from the light half of the year into the dark half of the year, and all of the work that waits for us there. In Mabon season, when we break all that stuff down, it's fruition, it's health, it's abundance, it is rest after labor and healing and slowing down and purification. It is balance and it is atonement. And then it is also shifting seasons, underworld journeys, and our, of course, ubiquitous ancestor and shadow work that hangs out with us. So these are the topics that we are we're rolling through as the season of Mabon rolls over us. We are still within the tree month of Ivy. So everything that we've talked about in the last podcast or two about the Celtic tree month of Ivy still applying to us right now. Main themes: immortality, life after death, hand fastings and marriages and things that connect and bind and reach out and collude with, as well as abundance and protection and anti-intoxication, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And so that brings us to this full moon. So let's break down this big old title because we have a lot of words here. Super, full, hunters, moon, Aries. Okay. As we've talked about many times in the past, we will yet again. When we are hanging out with a full moon, with our plant metaphor that we like to work with, we are at the portion of the process where a fruit has appeared, a piece of fruit has arrived, aka results from whatever we've been doing or not doing have begun to appear from that stuff. This full moon, actually, I'm not going to get into that just yet. We'll talk about that in a second. So that's what's up with full moons. When we are hanging out with a full moon, it is a great time to witness or celebrate or reflect on the fullness of a situation, the totality of a process sort of being illuminated for a moment. It might be a moment of crisis. It might be a moment of culmination where something has been building and building and building, and now here we are at sort of the pinnacle of it, or the totality of it, or the fullness of it, at least this time around, right? And we've talked about that in the past, where like none of us are ever going to do one of these processes one time, and for very few, I mean, if you're a baby, if you're brand new to the stuff, welcome to it. But a lot of us have been around the sun a couple times, or we are the ancients of days, whatever. But this isn't our first time that we've addressed this process, right? So it's a moment of like, how are we doing this time around the spiral? Kind of a gig there. That's what we're doing, or that's the vibes of the full moon. And do we do magic on a full moon, or do we hang out on a full moon? There are plenty of witchy sources out there that would say absolutely yes, we do magic on full moons. Generally speaking, yes. This full moon is a little spicy, and we're gonna get into the details of that in just a second. So there may be a little bit more of a like buyer beware, like read the fine print on this one before you jump in. But generally, yeah. But it's also totally cool to just like enjoy the full moon and like light some candles and zhuzh up your altar and have some friends over for like a little hangout, whatever that looks like for you, or whatever. Just like just like exist and enjoy life. I know. In this economy. I insist upon it. Your witch is telling you it's your once a month relax and just enjoy some shit for a half hour. Thank you. All right, so let's get into some of these other words that we have here. It's a super full moon. What is a super moon? In the moon's orbit around Earth, the orbit is not a perfect circle. It is actually an elliptic, and Earth is not perfectly at the center of it. It's off to one side a little bit. And so there are portions of the moon's orbit where it gets closer to Earth and portions where it is further away. Our supermoons, we will have one, at least one, every year. And it's simply the moon that is the closest moon for us. The full moons are the ones folks tend to pay attention to because you can see by a few percentage points that the moon is literally bigger in the sky, a little bit bigger. But we can also have a super new moon. And the opposite of this is, of course, the micro moons, and that's when the moon is at its furthest point away from Earth, so it's a little bit smaller than it usually is. And again, we can have micro new moons and micro full moons. For me, and this is just kind of a take that I'm like working with, right? So this is a working hypothesis on the magical or astrological influences of micromoons and full moons, if they even exist, right? I'm sure there are plenty of astrologers and other magical folk out there that are like, who cares? Don't pay attention to that. Does not matter. But I'm kind of playing with the idea that our micromoons tend to feel like a little more abstract, a little more maybe existential, a little more remote. Whatever the information is that might be coming through on a micromoon might be a little harder to access, or it comes through from like more odd sources, or it's like coming through in dreams or something like that, versus a supermoon may feel like a little more obvious, a little more up in your face. A little more direct, a little more loud, more straightforward, not so much existential as like very overt, and sort of like plain and obvious to see. And, depending on what we're talking about, that can be really helpful or yikes, right? Or like, yeah, ugh, that's gross and I didn't want to see it in that much detail, but here we are. I think that the fact that it is a supermoon, and I think we're going to be feeling it for a couple of days after the literal fullness moment, I think it's good. I think it's good with the other astrology and various things that are happening this week. I think it's good that we are a little up close on this, that we're getting the front row pass, to be right on in there and be able to see the details of this, because it's bringing up some spicy stuff for us, and it's like we've got to get into this and deal with it. Okay. Then this is also the Hunter's Moon. This is a traditional name for this moon. And so, a little something from the Wheel of the Year workbook. The full moon closest to the fall equinox is called the harvest moon. And that moon can happen in September or October. We've already had that full moon. When it falls in October, it's called the blood harvest moon. We had one a couple years ago. This is one of 2 full moons whose names are determined by an event and not the month. So we can have a harvest moon in September or October. We can have a blood harvest moon in October. But the other moon is the hunter's moon. And the hunter's moon is always the full moon that follows the harvest moon. And this can happen in October or November. So we've already had a full moon that was all snugged up super close to the fall equinox. That was our harvest moon. So this year, this full moon is our hunter's moon. And that imagery of these 2 moons sharing names in a way, right, is an interesting thing that we may see somewhere else as we carry on. Okay. So as I said, this full moon is pretty spicy. It is ruled, it's full moon in Aries, right? Ruled by Mars, who is hanging out in Cancer, where it is not at all pleased to be doing that. Mars does not enjoy hanging out in Cancer for the most part. And Mars is squaring this moon. Oh, okay. Well, that's... and this is just 2 points of the cardinal cross that is getting, like, lit up by this lunar transit. Like, lit up. So, there is a chart up for patrons, but you can, go to any of the free websites and go look at the chart of this moon. This moon is square to Mars in Cancer, opposing the sun in Libra, which every full moon is opposing the sun, so that's that part, whatever. It's also square Pluto in Capricorn, and it is conjunct Chiron in Aries. Okay. That is the whole cardinal boy band back on tour. Yikes. Okay. So as I said in the new moon podcast 2 weeks ago, whatever's time is bullshit. We have some tension. We have some tension in our cardinal signs. And this lunar transit is lighting up this grand cross. So let me take a second and check the vibes of the cardinal signs. What's going on with that? First and foremost, cardinal signs want to start stuff. They want to initiate and instigate. Cardinal signs are activating and enterprising. They're very direct and they're very purposeful. And all of us have cardinal signs in our chart somewhere. Whether we have placements there or not, every one of us has these 4 signs in our chart somewhere. But cardinal signs also can start stuff and not finish it. Cardinal signs can totally overcommit, and cardinal signs can also come on way too strong. So, breaking that down just a little bit further into some useful piles of adjectives When we think about Aries, we want to think about things like being childlike versus being childish, being pioneering, being spontaneous. But Aries is also really aggressive and selfish and can be really combative and offensive and defensive. And as I mentioned, the ruling planet of Aries, Mars, is hanging out in Cancer where it's fussy. It feels really passive aggressive a lot of the time as it makes its transit through that sign. So it's not like a super ultra exciting combo, right? Okay. Our next cardinal sign is Cancer, which is a sign that represents the parts of us that are psychic and gentle and vulnerable and protective, and maybe a little shy, maybe like very nurturing and home oriented. But Cancer also can be really patriotic and nationalistic and territorial. It can be super moody, and clannish and withdrawn or smothering and clinging. So again, here we go, right? And then our next cardinal sign is Libra. And Libra can be ultra mega cute and really motivated to move from a place of partnership and camaraderie and diplomacy and making these connections on the social level and is very dedicated and focused on fairness and justice and balance, but also can be really codependent, can be really passive, indecisive, and also really superficial and really, really like focused on appearances and uh, not necessarily like things being really healthy or actually fair and good. And then our last cardinal sign is Capricorn. And Capricorn brings organized energy, practical energy, realistic and constructive energy. And it's really a very pragmatic sign. But Capricorn can also be really controlling and really manipulating and opportunistic and Machiavellian, and really pessimistic and really distrusting. So, we can see how, like, we have placements in all of these signs, and all of the placements are either conjunct, in opposition, or square to each other. So there is a lot of tension between the placements. And then, if we break it down to who the planets are, or who the celestial entities are that's hanging out, it's the moon, which is our daily habits and our routines, our memories about things, our what we have retained from the experiences that we've had, our intuition. The sun is our sense of self and our sense of purpose. Mars is the expression of our desire and our willingness to fight for something, or our need to fight for something or against something. Pluto is our relationship to power. And of course, we can't forget Chiron, the wounded healer and the wise one. So all of these parts of ourselves and the world are locked in a pretty tense conversation. So again, as I said before, with all of the squares and oppositions, I think that this is a really great full moon to witness a situation in full illumination, to witness the nature of the tension, to witness the impasse at the center of the crisis. May it be laid bare. May it be so ridiculously obvious to us that we cannot help but release some things and make room for something, the more functional and healthy soon. And while this can be a really, really painful experience, it is also super necessary if we're going to heal stuff. We need to know how deep the rot goes. So this is, harkening back to what I was saying a few minutes ago around this idea of this might be a really great moon to just sort of turn on all the lights, hone in the spotlight, light all the lamps, and just really take a good look at the fuck is going on. This moon, I think, is asking us, and this is something that I also say in the Wheel of the Year books. This is a moon. This full moon is asking us to find something meaningful to fight for, and or turn your swords to plowshares. And what does that phrase mean? And there is a very interesting ancient connection to this idea of swords and plowshares, which we will get to here in the broadcast momentarily. First of all, I don't know if you've been outside, but there are a few things to get riled up about going on currently on Earth. So if you are empty-handed, there is work to do. We can find something for you to do, assuredly. But the idea of turning swords to plowshares is in of itself this idea of taking the resources that we dedicate. I know, follow along, because this is a pretty wacky concept. Taking the resources that we dedicate to war and repurposing them towards things that support community. I know, hippie shit, but all the same, seems like everybody's really into like eating food and drinking clean water and having a place to live. These crazy Gen Alphas, you know what I'm saying? They'll just fall for any trend. Witness on this full moon the fullness of your process around your sacred warrior energy. What has been your conversation with that stuff? As I said before, the difference between being self-centered and being centered in self. Where can we light lamps and curse the forces that would diminish that light at the same time? I don't think it can be an either or right now. And so this might be a full moon for you to just sit back, do some journaling, ponder, consider, witness, think about stuff. We can look back at the very least, 6 months ago, but we can also think back a year ago. Is anything going on with like aggression and nationalism and overt displays of power around the world, and like, people maybe or maybe not getting access to resources, and I wonder, gosh, crazy, weird stuff. Must be surely a coincidence. And if we think about this moon within the context of the wheel, within the context of Mabon, right, and the work that we're doing here, the Aries full moon always comes to us while we are in the midst of Libra, and it literally harkens back to 6 months ago to our Aries new moon, which happens somewhere in the first month of spring. And this Aries full moon happens somewhere within the first month of fall. And so there is a very, very clear connect here. As I said a couple of weeks ago in the other podcast, think about the seed and think about the harvest. Think about the seed, think about the harvest. In your personal life, in your community, and in the world at large. What are we planting and what are we harvesting? And what forces might be influencing what we plant and influencing how we feel and interact with what we are harvesting on a global level or a social level? I wonder. Okay. We're going to come back to some of this symbology over and over again through this week. As we do here on the podcast. Surprise, it's happening again. Okay, I think that's everything I want to say about this moon proper. I will give the plant body lunar work stuff at the end of the podcast. I didn't do it in the new moon one. I had changed my mind. I don't like it. Feels wrong. I have to include it. So, I work for people, beings, whatever. And it was like, no, you have to include that. And I was like, whoop, my bad. Sorry. It will be there next time. Okay. So let us now look at the astrology of this lunar week, which runs from October 17th to October 23rd, basically. First off, 10/17, we have Venus in Scorpio, sextile Pluto in Capricorn at, of course, 29 degrees. Pluto retrograde, no, direct, whatever. 29 degrees. Intense feelings. Like, what else do we need to say? It's a sextile, so it is generally a helpful process, but given all the things that I just said about the moon, this Venus Pluto moment could feel a little spooky or a little intense. This might be a point where you see that larger conversation filtering down into your relationships and how it's influencing those relationships. And this might be a day where you have some intense emotional communication with your loved ones, your relationship partners, whoever they are. But everybody's kind of down for it. It's like, whoa, this is heavy, but I'm here for this. I have energy, I have time, because it's a sextile. So it's more helpful. And again, remember that our transits, generally speaking, are lasting for like at least 24 hours ish. Give or take some hours on either end. Some of these transits, especially some of these transits, we can even think of as lasting 36 hours to 48 hours. So the day is when it's like exact. But we oftentimes will feel the transit coming on a couple days early, and we might hear it or feel it resonating for several hours up to a day after the transit is exact. Okay. Also on this day, October 17th, we have Venus entering Sagittarius. So what do we get with that? Well, Venus, who represents our values, our aesthetics, and our relationships, might be taking on or interested in exploring our values, exploring aesthetics, and exploring relationships that feel adventurous, philosophical, centered in truth seeking, that feel optimistic or evoke optimism, and that are visionary. Watch out for a pompous windbag or two. Hi, Sagittarius Sun, with also stellium, so I'm just saying. If there was a pompous windbag anywhere, I think the call is coming from inside the house. So, but watch out for a pompous windbag or two, buying things on blind faith, and being really dogmatic or zealous or self-righteous, or falling for somebody's dogma or zealous or self-righteous bullshit. We may be a little more susceptible to that. All right. October 20th, we have our disseminating moon in Gemini at 12 degrees. Write shit. Write anything. Literally write anything. If you feel like publishing it, super great. If you want to read other people's writings on literally any topic, cool. But it is a great day for doing your own writing for literally any purpose. Just to get some stuff out of you. You've got an ongoing project. There's whatever. Just write some stuff. Do it. Okay. October 21st, Mercury in Scorpio trines Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 13 degrees. Mercury trines Saturn, awesome day for diligently, patiently thinking our way through problems. Mercury trine Saturn can lead to conversations that move very slowly but very deliberately. But generally speaking, Mercury trine Saturn is really fantastic for organizing stuff, for getting your thoughts in order, literally, and communicating or writing or thinking through things that need attention and need patience, because Saturn is more than happy to plop itself down and take all the time in the world to make its way through something. Saturn likes to be diligent. Saturn also likes to do things one time correctly, and then we don't have to go back. So it's a great day for that kind of stuff. And again, that might be really, really helpful after conversations, writing stuff with the Gemini moon, and again, the tension of this full moon of like, this is a great day where I can kind of put my thoughts in order and talk about some of this or get some of this written down. October 22nd, we have the Sun in Libra squaring Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 29 degrees. This is most likely going to bring up power dynamics. There may be some problems with authority or authority figures. If you are the authority figure, you might be problematic, or somebody may just randomly have a problem with you. We may also see the breakdown of machines and the breakdown of situations at large. And if you've been keeping up with astrology over the last 5 years, a lot of folks have been talking about how pivotal Pluto is in terms of a symbolic representation of a lot of the things that we're experiencing here on Earth. So, that could be great or terrible when we're talking about larger situations breaking down and there being like tense power dynamics and issues with authority, etc., etc. I know. Also, on this day, just minutes later, after the sun has this, boxing match argument moment with Pluto, the sun enters Scorpio. Every planet that passes over 29 degrees of a cardinal sign is going to have a tense moment with Pluto. It's like this initiatory thing that everybody has to go through before they can move on with whatever they're supposed to be doing. And soon it will be 0 degrees and then 1 degrees of Aquarius. And so every planet that enters a fixed sign will now be having an argument with Pluto before it moves on with its business. But what do we get with the sun entering Scorpio? Again, the sun is our sense of self, and it's our sense of purpose. And so we may be looking for ways to express our sense of self, or things or people or environments to align our purpose with that feel transformative, cathartic, healing, and powerful. And again, watch for jealousy, watch for power hunger, watch for fixation, being vindictive or people being vindictive around you, and malicious secrets. Pluto gets weird about shit sometimes, and that's the ruling planet of Scorpio. Scorpio itself can be a funky sign. It's a sort of, we have to go down into the dark first before we can ascend kind of thing. And sun, sense of self. So we may be seeking out those kinds of environments that, again, are very cathartic, transformative, healing, right? A healing environment, I need a healing environment, or I need healing implies that I'm wounded, right? Or I'm poisoned, or something has gone awry. So, intense stuff. And our last astro transit for the week, also October 22nd, Venus in Sagittarius trine the North Node in Aries at 6 degrees. So again, Venus being our values, our aesthetics, the way that we express that stuff in the world, coming into alignment, or kind of a moment of like, is this in alignment with our life's direction? So the things that I say I value, is my life's direction in alignment with that? No pressure, right? Super cash. And if not, do something about it, right? Make one small adjustment or one massive one. To me, something like this, and again, I'm biased, but to me, something like this is like, are you a customer at a bank that invests your money in terrible places? Can you move to a local co-op that doesn't do that? This might be, right? That's you bringing your values into alignment with your life's purpose and the direction that your life is headed. Venus oversees that kind of stuff, but there's that. Okay. So that is our astrology, more or less, for the week. A tiny ad. Dun 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 dun. Please share or like or comment and or subscribe to this podcast, to this wah. Thanks to listeners like you. No, but genuinely, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, thank you so much to my patrons who support this. You guys are so patient with my bullshit. It's really ridiculous. If you love this podcast and you want to support it, thank you so much. You can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 to just throw $1 in my tip jar every month. Folks that subscribe at the $5 level a month and up get stuff. Writings, charts, various things connected to this podcast, and lots of other stuff that I do. As well as like discounts. You automatically get a discount code that's good on lots of stuff over and over again. You get first access, early access, and exclusive access to lots of things, etc., etc., etc. Thank you. And if you don't have the financial room to support this podcast, word. You are seen and felt and held. As I said before, please share this. Give it a like, give it a rating. Ratings and reviews on podcast platforms. Massive. The algo robots love that shit. So if you're into it, Please do. Thank you so much. Back to this. All right. Let's now get into the holy days of this week. We're not going to cover everything that's going on. I just want to focus on a couple of things that are going on this week. For reasons, which I was about to go on a long-winded tangent explaining myself, and then I was like, no! So in this moment, I'm very proud of myself. Watch me just go off the rip in like 5 minutes. Anyways, okay, as I said last week or week before, whenever the last podcast came out, for our Japanese friends and ancestors, running from approximately late September all the way through December, we still have Momiji Gari Festival happening, which is the Autumn Leaf Viewing Festival, Autumn Leaf Appreciation Festival, which literally runs for months. I love that. It's so good. From October 2nd through November 7th, we still have the Orionids meteor showers doing their thing up in the sky. I do believe that the 20th and the 21st are supposed to be super banging. The full moon is still going to be kind of bright. The fullish, right? Not entirely full anymore, but still not small full moon. Not small moon will still be somewhat bright. So check your local sky guides to see when the peak of the showers will be hitting for your area. Will the moon be up yet or already be down by the time it's the time for you to go out and check out the meteor showers? Recommend. Okay. And then running from October 14th through the 28th, we have from our Norse friends and ancestors, winter nights / Vetterblot. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. And so I am going to read about winter nights to you from the Nordic Animist Year by Rune Rasmussen, who is a fantastic teacher, a funny scholar, a all-around probably great guy. I've never met him in person. I have no idea. Could be a total asshole. I don't think so, though. But he has done a really, really, really great job at sorting through a lot of Nordic history and tradition and Northern European, to a lesser extent, history and tradition, and put together this incredibly useful book about the Nordic Animist Year and where he thinks a lot of their festival days and celebration moments would have happened. And so we turn to winter nights. And he has this marked very specifically at October 14th, and he also points out that this probably would have been in alignment with the October portion full moon. And that's where we're at. So that's what we're doing. So it's possible, even though I have in my calendar that this runs from October 14th to the 28th, we could also say that this year it is running from October 17th to October 31st. Interesting. Okay. So again, reading from the book, I'm going to read, I think, this entire piece because it's really great. And there's very interesting details in here that are going to connect to some other stuff that we're talking about, as usual. This calendar places the winter nights at their likely pre-Christian location as recorded by the English chronicler Bede, who we have talked about quite a bit here on the podcast. They make up the full moon period of the 10th lunar month, the first full moon after the new moon after autumnal equinox. And so again, that's what we're using to name this moon the Hunter's Moon, right? Again, a common marker. So, winter nights are the ancient opening of winter, originally a 3-day celebration. Again, we're reading from the Nordic Animist Year by Rune Rasmussen. It's been celebrated with games, wrestling, horse races, put a pin in that, and in heathen times marked intensive sacrifices as well. And we do see that is something that we talk about in the modern pagan wheel as well, that as we move into deep October and November, Samhain marks the blood harvest, which is where the culling happens for the herds. And that is calculated after all of the grains and the nuts and the veg and the fruit have been pulled in, and people know exactly how much food they do or don't have to keep everybody and the animals alive all the way through until next year, basically to harvest season. So now those types of decisions are being made. The completion of harvest celebrations marked the end of one natural year. So many offerings had to be made before the darkness that would give birth to the new year. In fact, there are indications that winter nights may have been considered the beginning of the heathen agrarian year. And we do see other cultures having New Year's celebrations at this time of year. One of many, right? We have Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur happening at this time of year. We have Diwali is about to happen at this time of year, which is the Hindu New Year welcoming in the dark half. And of course, for Celts, they just had two halves of the year. They had two major celebrations, Beltane and Samhain. And so this is a common theme that we see amongst some groups. There are indications that heathens worshipped Frey, the elves, right? Okay, we know, so the elementals, right? The Vanir, and a number of sagas mention sacrifices to the Dizir taking place at this point of the year. This opening of the dark season is also a point at which oracular seether could be consulted for omens in the new year. A number of sagas describe Vuller or Spa men as being active during this season, and the holiday seems to be reflected in a narrative from a skaldic poem which recounts how a traveler in autumn was denied hospitality and shelter at a farm in the 11th century because the people were celebrating Alfablot, or the sacrifices to the elves, and told the traveler that they feared Odin's wrath if they opened their house to him. The Icelandic tale Vosa Pater recounts a strange ritual which may also have been associated with the winter nights. The story describes the cult worship of a horse's phallus practiced at a Norwegian farmstead. Put a pin in that as well. Both the references to elves and the phallic cult may reflect the worship of the god Frey, which was particularly meaningful at this point in the year. According to the Norwegian Guloping law, this was the time to pray for Ars og Fridar, bountiful year and peace. Apologies for all of the mispronunciations. Please take me under your wing and teach me how to speak it, whomever is listening to this, okay? And then a little bit more. Again, we are reading this from the Nordic Animist Year from Rune Rasmussen. These nights were considered the onset of winter in northern Scandinavia, probably the beginning of the year. Scandinavians counted a day from the onset of darkness to the following darkness, and it is likely that the onset of the winter darkness was considered the opening of the year. There is a British scholar named Terry Gunnell who believes that the pre-Christian year was characterized by two seasons: winter season, associated with women, death, and magic, and a summer season associated with men and trade and warfare. And we do see that sort of binary breakdown in a lot of the other systems that we work with. Not all of them. And plenty of them have those symbols and more. This does seem to resonate with the presence of wild magic goddesses in the winter folklore. The element of magic relies on the threshold of winter as one of the transitional times when the borders between worlds are thinner than normal, which tends to make such holidays appropriate for divinatory practices, even shamanism. A number of sources mention the lady of the house leading sacrifices to wights of the home, as well as to the Disir goddesses, whose time is approaching. In the phallic ritual described in Volsapater, the people of the house, primarily the women, address a figure or figures called Mornir, who are believed to refer to female Jotnar, or giants. This is likely a religious practice centered around a sexually transgressive, dangerous femininity, and thereby linked with the focus on wild goddesses that characterize the dark period. End quote. Again, this is all from The Nordic Animist Year by Rune Rasmussen. Now, here's my... back to me. Okay. Thank you, Rune. Love your stuff. What a treasure this book is, really. Now, I love that he talks about this because this is a tip that I was on a few years ago. There is just a cavalcade of amazing but somewhat obscure festivals, holy days, and celebrations that center around women, magic, femininity, quote unquote, whatever that means for us, right? Especially in the modern era, and wildness, feral energy, or the undoing of the natural, quote unquote, order, right? Because a lot of this is still, a lot of these cultures that we're talking about, even if we're talking about stuff that was happening 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, still heavily influenced by the patriarchal regime. And so there's this idea of like gender roles and all of that bullshit. And this is one of those moments of like, no, we are loosening the chains. We are shrugging off the traditional order of things, and we are moving into disorder. And that is right and good. That is what naturally happens. And some other people and other techniques are going to take over. If you, I know I've already directed you there once, but if you check out the Samhain section under the Wheel of the Year on my website, there are a few different articles that talk about this sort of, this dangerous, frightening, primal, wild, or also like very intelligent and calculating, but still very dangerous femme energy that comes up to the surface at this time of year. We've already had some. We've had Thesmophoria already happened last week. That's from our ancient Greek friends and ancestors. I have an article about this web story on my website, or this myth on my website. Just a 3-day festival where women just lose their shit. They leave town. They actually leave plants in their bed that are like anhedoniac, like anti-pleasure, like saltpeter. Basically, that's just like, so they leave a hunk of this, like a branch of this plant in their bed where they normally sleep. Like, you're looking for me? Here's that. Enjoy. And they and the homegirls peace out and take off to the countryside and set up a little makeshift camp for themselves and party and fart and burp and fight and argue. And basically it's this post harvest, post Eleusinian mysteries festival that takes place. That's sort of there's a lot of stuff embedded in it with Demeter, Thesmophoria, and Persephone, and another goddess who is very interesting named Baubo, and the ideas of this sort of return to a foundational sense of sexuality and sexual healing. I had a lot of fun writing it. But my point is that Winter Nights is a really great 2-week celebration that pagans and heathens and witches, I think, can learn about, participate in, or take some cues from in terms of these 2 weeks that are leading up to the big hoorah festival of Samhain. And that there is this multi-week, not just these 2 weeks, but before this, during this, and after this multi-week, even month-long piece that's sort of embedded here between Mabon and Samhain of these various goddesses coming forward in forms and shapes that might be frightening or destabilizing, and they are here to specifically do that. They're here to destabilize and undo the order of things, because the year is running out. The old year is done, and for some groups the new year is here, right? A lot of witches and pagans celebrate a spiritual new year at Samhain. And if not here, winter solstice, right? So soon enough. as well as I mentioned, lots of other groups are celebrating New Year's or types of New Year's at this time of year. So just cool stuff. And again, a nice cohesive take on the Nordic version of a thing that we see in a lot of different places happening right now. Wild, frightening, powerful forces. Can be yours for $19.99. All right. What else do we have happening here? Running from October 16th to the 23rd, we have from our Jewish friends and ancestors the festival of Sukkot. Again, as I mentioned before, this is a part of the Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Yom Kippur festival complex that we see take place over several days. And in this is a harvest festival where folks would go out and build little makeshift shelters and go sleep in the fields, finish up the harvest. It does connect to the Exodus story from Jewish myth and history. But again, another thing of like people going out and making makeshift places to live and doing stuff out in the fields, and it's just over and over and over again, honestly. All right. Rolling it back just a smidge, October 16th, we had the heliacal rising of the fixed star Spica, and October 17th, we have the heliacal rise of the fixed star Arcturus. Latitudinally, these stars are practically conjunct. They are more or less kind of on top of each other. Spica we find in Virgo, and Arcturus we find in the constellation Boötes, which I think I am pronouncing correctly. These are thought to be two of the most fortunate stars in the sky. They are very close in longitude, very close in latitude, whatever. I get my shit mixed up. While Spica is often described as being very sweet and innocent, Arcturus is more apt to dealing with the darker forces or darker elements of life on Earth. Both of these stars are part of the 15 Behenian fixed stars that a lot of stellar magicians and planetary magicians work with. We see the Behenian fixed stars show up in ceremonial magic and some other fancy spots. Arcturus is often depicted as a horse. Wait, what? Just wait a minute, what? Hello? Also depicted as a wolf or a man dancing, but a horse, okay? Spica, of course, is the ear of grain that is held in the left hand of Virgo. Arcturus is found in the knee of Boötes, who is the herdsman or the protector of the herd. Put pins in all of this stuff, okay? Arcturus is also known as the bear leader or the bear guardian, and sometimes that is interpreted as the one who leads the bear or the one who guards the bear, or this is a guardian or a leader with bear energy and bear essence about them. The main star, this is the main star of the constellation Boötes. Also, another name for Boötes is the driver of oxen. Sorry. But Arcturus is like the fourth brightest star in the sky. So it's kind of a big deal. So we see Arcturus in myths in the role of the protector, the guide, the guardian of the herd, bringing in this bear energy, potentially. But usually described as like being really unbiased. Like, I'll protect everybody is sort of his attitude or their attitude. And then Spica is, again, the grains, the handful of grains that Virgo holds in their left hand. And so it's just sort of benevolence and gifts. This is like a symbol of the heavens and the earth together between these two stars that we are protected. And the energy from Spica kind of reads like this. Did you do your labor? Did you do your work? If you didn't, then I don't have anything for you. If you did, Here is a basket of results and bounty and goodness from the labor and the work that you did. And Spica also will kind of have an attitude about those gifts and bounties, like, be open minded about what they might look like. They might be specifically just for you to use internally, or they might be things that you're meant to share with other people. They might be philosophical gifts or material gifts, or what, it could be all kinds of stuff, right? So just be open minded about it, and it really is, did you do your work? Then here's the results of that. And if you didn't do your work, then Spica's got nothing for you. And then the very next day, we hang out with Arcturus. And Arcturus says, I specifically have material bonuses for you. I have material gifts for you. But I'm watching you. You better go share that. You better go spread it around and use it for yourself and your community. I'm watching. Arcturus has a little more of a stiffness, a meanness about it. And so he's like, I'm here to protect. I'm here to make sure that you've got what you need, but I'm also here to make sure that you're utilizing it in an earnest way that's helpful to everybody. Abuse the bounty, or take it from others, or deny it to them. And the Regent Protector will step in as they would step in on any other predator, right? So there is this attitude from Arcturus that's like, I'm handing you power, I'm handing you gifts, and you're meant to go pass that out and share that with other people. And if I see that you are stealing it from other people, or withholding it, or being selfish about it, or being weird with it, I'm gonna come after you like I would come after a wolf going for the herd. Because you've now become an enemy of the collective in that, like, we can't trust you, right? And so, to me, there's something really interesting about the symbology of Virgo and Boötes together in the sky. Like, Boötes is above Virgo. So there's this idea of, like, the herdsman is above, the grain maiden is below, right? There's some imagery there. But also that Virgo is, like, the protector of the harvest. She oversees, or they oversee, the grain harvest, the veg, the fruit, and the nut harvest. Like, that is their whole gig. And then right there by their side is Boötes, the herdsman and protector, who is overseeing the protection of the herd and the animals, who are, in some of our traditions, soon to be harvested. But even if they're not, right, like, there's just this cool pairing of these two coming in and saying, we are overseeing the protection of the material world resources and all of the labor that has gone into acquiring that stuff, and we want to make sure that everybody's acting right, or we are coming after you. And I don't know if anybody's paying attention to world events right now, but there are some people who are withholding resources from other people, and there's some very interesting world leader conversations around that stuff. We're going to get into it even more. I know. Okay, here we go. Moving on. From our Egyptian friends and ancestors, October 17th through October 31st in the ancient world, we had the festival of Taking to the River. And this is a 2-week festival that runs at this time of year, kicked off by the full moon, where the Ennead, or the great gods and goddesses of the Egyptian pantheon, take a boat ride. They go sail on the Nile. And as well, there is a bunch of, like, offerings and thanks given to the Nile, because it has been flooding the delta in the ancient Egyptian world at this point, and flooding all of the farmlands, and now the Nile is starting to mellow out a little bit with that. Okay. On this same day, stay hydrated, people. On this same day, from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the ceremony, or the festival, or the sacrifice of the October horse. Is everybody following along with me on this? Okay. The October horse was an animal sacrifice to Mars, who rules Aries. Okay? Is everybody keeping up with me? Coinciding with the end of the agricultural and military campaigning season. Swords and plows. Okay. Trippy. In case you didn't know, before Mars was a war god, he was an agricultural god. Go look it up. The October horse is the only instance of horse sacrifice in Roman religion. Right here on these same days, more or less, when we have these other horse rituals happening around the planet and a fixed star, a very, very potent fixed star up in the sky connected to horses. Interesting. Other Indo-European forms of horse sacrifice, such as the Vedic Ashvamedha and the Irish ritual described in various tomes, both of which have to do with kingship. Put a pin in that. The horse ritual was carried out ob frugum eventum, usually taken to mean in thanks for the completed harvest or for the sake of the next harvest. Because, yes, some harvesting has come to an end in ancient Rome, and also winter wheat was being sown at this time of year to be grown over winter. Lots of this information coming from Wikipedia, by the way. The phrase that has been connected to the divine, this phrase, ob frugum eventum, has been connected to the divine personification of bonus eventus, or good outcome. So we've had a couple indications of that thing, right? Who had a temple of unknown date in the Campus Martius. The Campus Martius was a campus that was dedicated to Mars, and was one of the 12 agricultural deities, bonus eventus. This rite took place during one of the 3 horse racing festivals held in honor of Mars, the others being in February and March. 2 horse chariot races were held in the Campus Martius, after which the right-hand horse of the winning team was transfixed by a spear and then sacrificed. Spear, of course, being the sacred weapon connected to Mars and Aries. The horse's head, caput, and tail, cauda, were cut off and used separately in 2 subsequent parts of the ceremonies. 2 neighborhoods staged a fight for the right to display the head, and the freshly bloodied horsetail was carried to the Regia for sprinkling on the sacred hearth of Rome itself. So here we have in our Roman folk another horse festival, or a horse festival where there's a horse sacrifice, similar to the Nordic folk, who have something about maybe Horus Phallus being a big deal at this time of year. Weird, trippy, cool. Could be totally unrelated and could be a total coincidence. And I don't mean that ironically or sarcastically. Genuinely, could be a weird, cool, trippy coincidence. But what a coincidence, right? Horses and chariots have a lot of like built-in imagery of the soul and the Merkaba, the soul and the thing that it rides in. We see at summer solstice lots and lots of sun symbols being carried across the sky in chariots. So maybe, this is me just riffing, okay? I'm not saying that there's any historical foundation or accuracy to what I'm about to say, but maybe there's something about this ritual that is about the breaking down of the sun as it gets lower and lower in the sky, and maybe there's some connection with that, with horses and chariots and stuff. I don't know that, just riffing. But we do have this connection to Mars, agriculture, and military campaign seasons coming to an end at this time of year. That's all fact. Okay, what else is happening on this same day? We're still on October 17th. We are still on October 17th. What else is happening on this day? Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Ludi Capitolini. Now, this is another trippy series this kicks off another trippy series of things that we see running through this week. The Ludi Capitolini initially had one form, which was really weird, and then it ended, and then it started up again by the Romans, and it was very similar to the Greek Olympic Games. So there was lots of athletic, challenges and stuff like that. But the big part of it was bestowing rewards and crowns on poets, orators, historians, musicians, comedians, writers, etc., etc. So, do we literally have a day this week where it's like, go write anything, put it out into the world, do anything? Oh, yeah, we totally do. 1020, disseminating moon in Gemini at 12 degrees, and here 1017, ancient Romans are like, hey, put out the rewards for the writers, the poets, the orators, the historians, etc., etc. Cool. Okay. Also on this day, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Sharad Purnima, and this is a festival celebrating the end of the monsoon season. From our Laotian friends and ancestors, we have Bun Ok Phantsa, which marks Buddha's return from heaven, where he's been bitching out and or preaching to the various gods and goddesses up in the heavens. Buddha's return to earth, and signifies the end of Buddhist Lent, when after 3 months of retreat, the monks return to their daily social activities. Therein, to me, is a very cool connection, because that to me is very hermetic, very Virgo. We're still passing through the fixed stars of Virgo, and this is the last degree in sidereal astrology of the Virgo constellation. The next day, 1018, we'll talk about it in just a second, we have the sidereal sun entering Libra. Okay, and 1017, last but not least, from our global family, we have Spirit Day. This is LGBTQIA Two Spirit Plus Awareness Day, started by a Canadian teen in 2010 because of a series of suicides that were experienced in our alphabet family community up there in Canada. God us bless and keep those young souls. All right, moving on to October 18th. As I just mentioned, the sidereal sun enters Libra. That just means that the sun for real in the sky, the for real sun, has for real actually entered Libra, because tropical astrology is just about 2,000 years behind, give or take a couple hours. So we think that we are just about to enter Scorpio, and everybody else that practices astrology is like, no, we're just walking into Libra, but that's fine. Also on this day, 1018, we have, from our Catholic friends and ancestors, St. Luke's Day. What was St. Luke all about? Artists, writers, notaries, goldsmiths. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Also on this day, from our pagan and Wiccan friends and ancestors, we have the Great Horn Fair / the Feast of Cern or Kern. Now, this does, interestingly, in my mind, connect to Cern or Kern or Hern, the giant that we see in the UK, who, interestingly, possibly carries weapons, possibly is wearing an animal skin, possibly a hunter, possibly a herdsman, possibly a protector, maybe not. We have to remember that Kern the Giant, or Hern the Giant, was only built probably in the 1700s, but they also even they may have had a sacred belt at one time. Come on. Okay. It's too much sometimes. You know what I mean? Oh, wait, you guys don't know why the belt thing is a big deal, because we haven't gotten to that yet. Put a pin in it. But this character is also Hern, who is Hern the Hunter, who is a regional folk figure and myth figure that shows up late fall, like mid-fall, in some really interesting UK myths and folklore. But possibly their names are connected to the deity Cernunnos, who is connected to the great green wild of forests and nature itself. Who, in turn, is possibly connected to Odin and his wild hunt. It's just a big, giant, spirally, circly thing, isn't it? Okay, moving on to October 19th. From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the appearance of Thoth, the moon god in charge of wisdom, writing, knowledge, hieroglyphs, science, magic, art, judgment. I can't make this stuff up. I don't even need to make it up, but I also can't make it up. These are literally all words that almost all of these are words that we've already mentioned in this podcast having to do with something else. Okay. 1020. We have the heliacal rise of the fixed star Izar. This is a star that is also found in the constellation Boötes. That's our herdsman, the plower, the herd protector, the guardian. And this star is found in the waist of the plowman. The name Izar is Arabic for veil or girdle or a type of undergarment. It's also been called pulcherrima, which is Latin for loveliest. I couldn't run that piece down, but the veil, girdle, undergarment thing already had piqued my interest before I read any more about it. Because Virgo also wears a potent girdle, and we see other characters in the sky wearing really important belts and girdles in general, not just in astro-mythic symbolism, but in plenty of other myths and symbol sets around the planet. Girdles are oftentimes a representation of power, position of leadership, strength, all of that kind of stuff. So we see girdles as being kind of a representation of leadership and power in a lot of different places. Izar was revered by ancient people. Izar worship has been around for a long ass time, especially in Africa and South America, as a star from which their ancestors had first come to this planet. While the name Izar is merely Arabic for girdle, its position on the figure of Boötes, the herdsman, the word is frequently associated with czar or shah or other types of terms for leadership or protectors of society. Waha, okay. Now, side note, it is associated in Kabbalah with the letter Teth and the Hermit card. There's yet another connection there, right? This is in Boötes, it's not even in Virgo. But there can also be, with this fixed star, a deep fixation on the source of origin of things. And I want to just take a second. We had our two fixed stars, Spica and Arcturus, that were like, hey, we're handing out presents for folks who've been doing their work, and we're also handing out boons and gifts and abundance to people whom had better pass it out. They had better share it. We're entrusting you with this thing. You go distribute it with people under our distributing moon of Gemini. You're in charge of all that, and we're watching, we're paying attention if you're not doing the thing. And then here comes Izar, who is this star that represents a piece of clothing that often is worn by people in positions of power and leadership. Now, of course, we have just on the full moon had announced by the U.S. towards Israel that they may engage in an arms embargo if Israel doesn't distribute the food that it's been given, that it's been holding back from Palestinians. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Hey, wait. Here's something that we normally don't look at on the podcast, but go ahead and let's try it and see what happens. What does it look like to have this fixed star in a person's chart? Let's turn to some famous folks that have Izar in potent spots in their chart. How about Izar conjunct the sun, right? The sense of self. Who has that? Kamala Harris, Netanyahu. Okay. Adolf Hitler had Izar conjunct his ascendant. El Chapo had Izar conjunct his midheaven. Elon Musk has Izar conjunct his IC, or the nadir, the very bottom of his chart. And Ivan the Terrible had Izar conjunct his north node. So sounds like it's working out. Sounds like it's cool. And it sounds like this is just a bunch of coincidental stuff, right? Like, what a bunch of wacky stuff. So, interesting, right? Or horrifying. I don't know. You pick. And this is why I don't do mundane astrology like that. Woo! Because it's too much. It's just too much. But I think that they're, as usual with our fixed stars, to me, I often feel like the fixed stars, and I know like 5% of all of the 1% of all of the stuff that I could possibly know about fixed stars. But just in the little bit of dabbling that I have done with fixed star myths and symbolism, what I get intuitively from it, right? Oh, switching back from rambling lady on the internet to actual witch. What I get intuitively is that the fixed stars are like, we're here and we have our stories and we're just going to kind of like set our stuff down over here, and if you want to check it out and get involved in it, we're here. We're not going to push this on you, but we are 100% doing this thing every year. So get hip to it, kid. And pay attention when planets are in conjunction with fixed stars. Pay attention when the moon or the sun are hitting these fixed stars, because this is a voice in the choir that is speaking a story to us. I don't know. I'm going off on it. But it's just the symbolism to me is very overt. As I said, with the super full moon, for me, the symbolism is extremely overt. All right. What else is happening on this day? 10/20, October 20th. From our Shinto, Japanese Shinto friends and ancestors, we have Batara, which is dedicated to the god of fortune, Ibisu. From our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have the Karam Puja, which is a harvest festival. From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have two festivals, the Greater and Lesser Enneads land at Abydos. This is the conclusion of the boat ride that started a few days ago. And we also have the Lamentations of Isis and Nepthys. This is another thing that, oh my God, I could just go off forever on this. I'm going to try to rein myself in. Where are we in the podcast? We got hours to go. Okay, we're fine. JK. But this festival, Lamentations of Isis and Nepthys, this was a festival / a ceremony or a ritual conducted by two priestesses who played the roles of Isis and Nepthys and basically performed these lamentations, because it's Isis and Nepthys that go and gather up and mourn the dismembered portions of the body of Osiris after his murder by Set. Nepthys and Isis have a really cool, trippy, symbolic relationship between the two of them. They both... Hey, there we go. Thank you. They both are gateways of life and death. And when we look at the actual architecture of these massive Egyptian temples, we see these great gateways. Many of the temples, some of the temples anyways, one gateway is literally dedicated as a physical representation of Isis, and the other gateway is a physical representation of the goddess Nephthys. And you walk through temple one doorway into life, and you walk through the other one into death. Nephthys oversaw the very edge of the known and unknown world. And so, and she was married to Set, right? So there's a lot here about these two, the bright and the dark half of things, we might say, as we are here in the shifting time of the light half of the year giving way to the dark half of the year. There is so much to say about these two goddesses, about this goddess, about this festival. It's just really, really incredible stuff. Check out the Wikipedia page on Nephthys. Just like make a cup of tea and tuck in and check it out. She was a mortuary goddess. She was a protectress of the dead and the processes of death and the dead. We find Nephthys endowed with the epithet Nephthys of the bed of life in direct reference to her regenerative priorities on the embalming table. That's making me go all the way back to the fact that we're still in the Celtic tree month of Ivy, and that being a plant of life after death and immortality and a bed of life. Izar, something I left out of my notes, but I meant to add back. Izar also is often thought of as a source of light and a source of life. And that the figurehead of a lot of these works are sources of light and life. But she was also given the honorary title of the Queen of the Embalmer's Shop, etc., etc. She's a festive deity whose rites could mandate the liberal consumption of beer as well. And there's another thing there about intoxication or anti-intoxication. Nephthys is a goddess who gives the pharaoh power to see that which is hidden by moonlight. This fits very well with general textural themes that consider Nephthys to be a goddess whose unique domain was darkness or the perilous edges of the desert. So here also, I think it would be fair to include Nephthys in this collection of these female goddesses and these magical entities that are overseeing the undoing of life and heading into the dark half of the year and the dark realms of the year. Like I said, there is so much. Check out her Wikipedia page and be prepared to have your mind blown, dude. It's good shit. Okay. Also on this day, from our Roman friends and ancestors / Roman Syrian friends and ancestors, we have the Dies Natalis of a cult dedicated to Deus Sanctus Sol, or the Sun, and we also have Roman New Year in Roman Syria. And then the very next day, October 21st, from our Roman friends and ancestors, running from October 21st through the 24th, we have the Ludi Solis, which are the games for the sun. Seems like an interesting / weird time, but here we are. We have them here at this time. And I don't have anything in my notes about that. But yes, that's what's happening. Also at this time, October 21st to 28th, we have Ace Week for our global queer family. Ace Week celebrates awareness and making room for and educating yourself on and perhaps making friends with folks who are asexual. Shout out to our king, Grey Matter, on this season of Dragula. Yeah. If you haven't been watching it, it's so good. Okay. Also on this day, from our Caribbean friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Black Christ. And from our ancient Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Armilustrium, which is another portion of the closing down of the military stuff, festival, feast day, day of witnessing and celebration, etc. from ancient Romans. October 27th, modern pagan writer and influencer Aidan Kelly was born in 1940. And October 23rd, we have from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors the procession of Bast, the cat-headed goddess. And here in the Americas, we see the swallows leaving Capistrano. All right, my witches, that brings us to just about the end of the podcast. I think you can see why I was freaking out a little bit there throughout the whole thing, and like why our interesting astrology with this moon and of the week is kind of actually spicy, right? Because there's a lot of tension between the powers that be and the wounds and who gets access to what and territory and nationality and fixation on the origins of things and who's a protector and who's protected and etc., etc., etc. Light a motherfucking candle, my witches, okay? For your full moon observances, I know that this podcast is coming out a little bit late. It's fine. I think that this is a spicy enough full moon that we could just do it all week. Like, do it all the way to the waning half. You can add anything that symbolizes any of the stuff that we talked about in this podcast to your altars if you want to. You could certainly add, a set of scales or anything like that to bring in that Libra energy. You could add iron or red things to bring in that Aries energy. All I'm really thinking about are the tarot cards, the Empress, which connects to Venus, who's having some potent transits this week, as well as the ruling planet of Libra, where we are right now. The Emperor card, which connects us to Aries. And the Justice card, which connects us directly to Libra. If you haven't put any of those on your altar, you might hang out with them. I think on the full moon when I'm working with tarot, I tend to go for the major arcana because I'm like, give me the full whammy of the information and let me just soak in it for a while. I think I've already read this, but I'm going to read it again. For our witches' work this week, this moon asks us to find something meaningful to fight for and to turn our swords to plowshares. Yes, I did read this already, but I'm going to read it again. To witness the fullness of our process around our sacred warrior energy, the differences between being self-centered versus centered in self, and where we can light lamps and curse the forces that would diminish that light. I think that this is, despite all the stuff that I've already said, I actually think that this is a fantastic time for doing any kind of protection magics, especially on material stuff. Your actual home, your body, your property, that stuff. I think that this is a good week for doing that. If you're feeling like doing magic. I would recommend some protection magic is good. And maybe divination work also could be very potent on this moon, but I'm going to say you better read the fine print on that shit before you get involved, because I think that through divination some really heavy truths might be laid down. So don't engage if that doesn't feel like it's healthy for you, right? If that's too overwhelming, that's too much, don't do it. Don't do it. Light a candle, put some roses on the altar, call it a day. Like we're Gucci with that. But if you're like, I'm up for it, give me the bonus round, throw me in, coach, then go for it, But don't say I didn't warn you. With our Aries full moon, our lunar body work. Oh, it feels so good to just say that. Something was wrong. There was a disturbance of the force. With our Aries full moon for our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, or otherwise supporting or restoring the head, the hair, the scalp, the eyes, and the sinuses. These are all the parts of the body that are ruled by Aries. For our plant body work, we want to be pulling weeds, cutting trees for firewood or lumber. Obviously, some of these things may apply where you live and some may not, so, pick and choose what makes sense for where you are. But if you're cutting wood, it's for firewood or lumber. Plowing, cultivating, pruning trees and vines, doing pest and disease control, harvesting for below ground crops, specifically for drying and for storage. And if we're planting anything, which may or may not make sense where you are on the earth, biennials, perennials, bulbs, roots, any kind of trees that make sense, grapes, berries, potatoes, shrubs, etc. And then later in the week, we have our Gemini lunar body work, Gemini moment. And this is a great time for resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring our shoulders, our elbows, our wrists, our arms, our hands, and our armpits. And for our plant body work, we're pulling weeds, cutting trees for firewood or lumber, plowing, cultivating, pruning trees and vines, pest control, disease control, harvesting below ground crops for drying and storage. Literally all the same stuff that I already said for Aries. Same, all the same. All right, my friends. If this feels overwhelming, and that's fair, turn this shit off, okay? Stay safe out there. Astrology is awesome right up until the moment that it's not. Everything that I do in these podcasts is meant to inform, but also empower and inspire. Yeah, definitely that. So, one, you don't have to agree with all the conclusions that I come to. Two, you don't have to take all of my suggestions on work to be done. And three, you don't have to listen to this. Or you could take it a little bit at a time. If you're like, man, the stuff that you're laying down is really overwhelming. I'm not ready to deal with that about the world yet. I get that. But, and also, shit's wild on Earth right now. And we do need to be literally girding our loins, as Izar is pointing to, and getting ourselves ready for what is coming next. So, utilize the magic, utilize the astrology to help you with your process. And also remember that we absolutely can OD on too much information, right? If all we're doing is just acquiring more data, we might not actually be doing anything with it. Just lovingly and respectfully gonna throw that in there. Okay, but besides all of that stuff, take it easy. When we're having spicy Mars transits, I should have said this earlier, but I'm gonna say it as here at the wrap up. When we're having spicy Mars transits, we can get really, really impatient. So, give yourself an extra 5 or 10 minutes to get to from point A to point B. Slow down a little bit in traffic. Take a deep breath. You know you got a project coming up. Don't wait until the last minute and then freak out. Give yourself the space for whatever other chaotic moments may come up to knock you off of your game. And that way, if something does come along and disturbs your process or whatever, you don't have to get super impatient and freaked out about it. It's like, oh, I gave myself an extra day to deal with this anyways. There it is. Boom. But if you can show up for some of these different... let me say it this way. However you can show up, please do. However you can show up for these difficult conversations with the universe, with yourself, with partners, with society at large, with, I don't know, government officials, local and state and federal, show up for these conversations. We have to have them. We have to do this work. No, it's not going to be super exciting the whole time. It's not going to be fun. But we can do it, too, is the other thing. And it's Libra season, so we can do it while looking fucking cute, bitch, okay? Please. All right, my witches, that is everything. Please take care of yourselves out there. Blessed be.